Welcome to AITA Tales, where stories hit harder, feel realer, and stay with you longer. Subscribe now because the next story might change the way you see everything.
So picture this. You break up with someone 3 years ago. Clean split. No hard feelings. You exchange a text on New Year's and like one of her photos every 6 months. That's the whole relationship now. Then out of nowhere, she texts asking if she can move into your house. You say no. She pushes back. You say no again, clearer this time. 4 days later, you come home from work and she's sitting on your couch eating your favorite takeout with 3 suitcases against the wall. Because your own sister handed her a key to your home. What do you do when the people closest to you decide your no is just a suggestion? This guy found out. And then he handled it in a way that's going to make you want to stand up and slow clap. My ex texted, "I'm moving back to town and need a place to stay. Can I crash with you for a few weeks?" I replied, "That's not going to work." Then she showed up anyway with her bags, saying my sister had given her a key. When I changed the locks and told my sister she was no longer welcome either. I'm 31. I own my house, bought it 2 years ago, still paying it off, but it's mine. I work as an operations coordinator at a mid-sized consulting firm, which is a fancy way of saying I manage processes, timelines, and people who can't manage themselves. I'm good at it. I like my space, my routine, and my peace. Not in a dramatic way. I just know what I want, and I don't cave on it easily. That's not something I've always been able to say about myself. It took some time to get here, but it's who I am now. My ex, Kayla, and I dated for about 2.5 years. We broke up 3 years ago when she moved across the country for grad school. No blow-up, no cheating, no dramatic scene. Just a mutual conclusion that long distance wasn't something either of us wanted to sign up for. We ended it and stayed at the level of cordial. That means a Happy New Year text in January and maybe a comment on a photo every 6 months. Not close, not hostile. Just background noise in each other's lives. Looking back on it, the relationship itself was fine while it lasted. But there had always been a pattern with Kayla that I recognized even at the time and mostly let go because it didn't cost me much then. She had a way of treating other people's answers as the opening position in a negotiation. Not maliciously, I don't think she even noticed she did it. But a no from someone was rarely a full stop for her. It was more like a yellow light. She'd push a little, reframe things, find a new angle, and usually get what she wanted, because most people around her eventually gave in. I'd done it plenty of times myself when we were together. Small things. Plans she wanted to change. Decisions she wanted to revisit. It wasn't a deal breaker, but it was a pattern. I hadn't thought about her in months, so when her name showed up on my phone one regular Tuesday afternoon, I put down my coffee and read the message twice, just to make sure I was seeing it right. "Hey, big news. Got a job offer back home and I'm moving back. Need a place to crash while I look for an apartment? Just a couple of weeks. You're still at the same place, right?" I sat with that for a minute. Thought about whether I was misreading the tone. Concluded I wasn't. Then I replied, "Congrats on the job. Can't help with the housing though. Try extended stay or something." She came back fast. "Come on, seriously? We're adults. It's not weird. Just temporary." I kept it short. "Not going to work. Good luck with the move." Her next message was the tell. "Wow, okay. Didn't realize you were still hung up on the breakup. It's been 3 years." There it was. The classic pivot. Reframe his no as emotional damage, so the conversation shifts from her request to his character. I've dealt with that move before. I didn't take the bait. I told her I wasn't hung up on anything. That I just wasn't interested in having a roommate, especially an ex one. She signed off with whatever, guess I'll figure it out myself. I figured that was that. Message received, boundary acknowledged, move on. I went back to my evening and didn't think about it again. That was a mistake. Anyway, 4 days later, I got home from work on a Friday and immediately noticed my front door was unlocked. I always lock it. Always. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. I stood there for a second thinking through what to do, pushed it open slowly, phone in my hand ready to dial 911, walked in and stopped cold. Kayla was sitting on my couch eating takeout from my favorite Chinese spot downtown. 3 massive suitcases were lined up against the living room wall. Moving boxes were stacked in the corner next to my bookshelf. She had her shoes off and her feet up on my coffee table. She looked up and smiled like this was the most normal thing in the world. Surprise! I brought General Tio's. Got extra for you. I stood in the doorway and just stared. My brain was doing that thing where it knows something is deeply wrong, but needs a moment to catch up with what it's seeing. 5 full seconds of silence before I found words. What are you doing in my house? It wasn't a question. It came out flat. Your sister let me in. She gave me your spare key. She said you were being stubborn and would get over it once I was here. Isn't she the best? My sister, I'll call her Lily, had been living with me rent-free for 8 months while she figured out her life and worked on her art. We'd had a deal. She could stay while she got stable, but she had to contribute around the house and be looking for her own place. It was going fine. I'd given her a spare key for emergencies, real emergencies, medical situations, locked out situations, not hand it to my ex-girlfriend situations. She gave you a key to my house. Yeah, she said you were being dramatic over text, that you don't actually mean no when you say no, that you just need time to warm up to ideas. Kayla reached over and picked up another dumpling from the container like we were having a casual Friday night in. I called Lily on the spot. She answered on the second ring, sounding completely unbothered, almost cheerful. Oh, good, she made it. See, I knew you'd be fine once she was actually there. You gave her a key to my house. You were being ridiculous. She's not a stranger, you dated for years. She needed help, and you were being selfish. I told her I had said no. Twice. Not maybe. Not let me think about it. No. Lily's response was something I'm still thinking about weeks later. You say no to everything at first. Remember when I wanted to stay with you? You said no then too. But then you let me, and it's been great. That's just how you work. I told her that situation was completely different because she had asked me. She hadn't shown up with moving boxes while I was at work and let herself in with a key I'd given her for emergencies. Come home right now and get your key back. I can't. I'm out with friends. Besides, I gave it to her, so technically it's hers now. She hung up before I could respond to that logic. I turned back to Kayla, who was still eating, still perfectly relaxed. You need to leave. What? I already broke my lease. My stuff is being shipped here. I start a new job on Monday. I understand that, and none of it is my problem. You came here after I told you explicitly that you couldn't. The fact that you made permanent decisions based on an assumption doesn't give you a right to be here. But your sister said, my sister doesn't own this house. I do. She had no right to give you anything. Kayla's expression shifted, went from surprised to something harder and faster. Are you seriously going to make me homeless? What kind of person does that? The kind who said no and meant it. Hotels exist. Airbnb exists. Short-term furnished apartments exist. You have options. She went through the whole argument. She'd spent everything on the move. She didn't have money for a deposit right now. Short-term housing was outrageously expensive. I acknowledged all of it and told her that still wasn't my emergency to solve. She should have had housing secured before she broke her lease. She called me insane. I told her to take her stuff and go be insane somewhere else. She tried calling Lily, voicemail. Tried texting, nothing. Lily had helped start the fire and was now somewhere with friends, unavailable for the smoke. Then Kayla started crying. Not quiet crying, real commitment to it. She said she couldn't believe I was doing this after everything we had together. I told her what we had was 3 years in the past. She called me a jerk. I told her she was probably right, but I was a jerk with a lease and a locked door, and both of those were staying exactly where they were. She hauled her suitcases out in 3 trips, muttering the whole time about how much I'd changed. How the old me would never do something like this. She was right. The old me was a doormat who confused peacekeeping with people-pleasing. That version of me had been retired. I didn't miss him. After she left, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the spare key sitting on the counter, the one Lily had just handed out like it was her property to give. I sent Lily a text. We need to talk. What you did was not okay. Then I changed my Wi-Fi password, which she'd been using for 8 months. Small move, but it felt like the beginning of something. Pause for a second, And for anyone listening, this is me, the host, jumping in, not the OP. I want you to notice what he did not do in that confrontation. He didn't yell. He didn't get emotional and list every reason why this was unfair. He didn't threaten anything. He just kept repeating his answer until she left. That's the actual move here. The moment you start explaining yourself to someone who already ignored your no, you've handed them a debate. They'll argue every single point you make. He gave them nothing to argue against. Just, you need to leave on loop until it worked. Now Lily is still out there, and she's got 8 months of living in his house rent-free behind her, which means she's about to do something bolder than just giving out a key. Lily texted back the next morning. I'd been waiting for something defensive, maybe an apology with a bunch of qualifiers. What I got was the most entitled message I've read in my life. She said she couldn't believe I'd actually made Kayla leave, that Kayla was at a budget motel somewhere and couldn't afford to eat because all her money was going toward the room, that this was on me, personally, that I'd done this. I told her it was on Kayla for showing up uninvited and on Lily for giving out my key without permission. Her reply, I was helping someone. That's what decent people do. What is wrong with you? You violated your own values by turning her away. I read that twice, sat with it, then typed back that handing out a key to someone's home without their permission wasn't helping. It was overriding someone's decision because you thought you knew better. Big difference. Her next message, Mom wants to talk to you. My mom called within 3 minutes of that text. She opened with, your sister is very upset. What is this about you throwing your ex-girlfriend out in the cold? I walked her through the whole sequence. The text where I said no. Kayla showing up with 3 suitcases. Lily giving out the spare key and then defending it by saying I don't actually mean no. Here's the thing about Lily that I should give you some background on. She's 27. She has spent most of her adult life moving between situations where someone else absorbs the inconvenience of her choices. Before she moved in with me, she'd been staying with a college friend for 6 months, then our cousin for 4 months before wearing out her welcome there. She's talented. Genuinely, she makes good art, but she treats stability as something other people are supposed to provide for her on an ongoing basis. I agreed to let her stay because she's family and because she asked directly and honestly. I set clear terms. She followed them, mostly. But over 8 months, she'd also started to drift into treating my home like hers. Leaving dishes. Giving my address to her friends for deliveries. And apparently, filing my spare key locations away in her memory for later use. Mom's take on the whole situation. Well, maybe you shouldn't have said no in the first place. That girl was part of this family for years. You can't just abandon people when they need help. I explained as calmly as I could that Kayla hadn't been part of the family for 3 years, that we'd broken up, that I had the right to decide who lived in my house, and I had exercised that right clearly. You have a whole guest room sitting empty. It would cost you nothing to let her stay for a couple of weeks. It would cost me my peace of mind and my right to make decisions about my own home. That's not nothing. You're being selfish. We raised you better than this. I told her she raised me to keep the peace at my own expense, and I was done treating that like it was the noble option. That landed badly. She told me not to take that tone with her. I told her that Lily was no longer welcome at my house. She'd proven she couldn't be trusted with access to it, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Mom said I couldn't ban my own sister from my home. I told her to watch me. She started raising her voice about family loyalty and how I was tearing everything apart over nothing. I told her I was ending the call and did. Then I sat down and thought about what came next, because I knew this wasn't over. Hold on. Let me jump in here because I need to point something out. We raised you better than this. That line. Every family's go-to when someone finally stops absorbing the cost of other people's decisions. What it actually means is, we raised you to keep everyone comfortable at your own expense. And to his credit, he didn't wobble. No, I understand where you're coming from. No, let me think about it. He said, watch me. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. There's a real difference between being a jerk and being done being a mat. And his family was about to run a masterclass in proving his point for him. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. This is Kayla, using a coworker's phone. We need to talk. Your sister told me where the spare key is, the one under the rock by the back door. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. I had a second spare key. I'd hidden it under a decorative rock near my back door about 2 years ago. Pure habit thing. Never needed it. Completely forgot it was there. I'd never told anyone about it, but apparently Lily had seen me put it there once and filed that information away and had now passed it along to Kayla. I ran outside. The rock was moved. The key was gone. I called a locksmith immediately. Emergency weekend service. $250, worth every cent. While I waited for him to show up, Lily appeared at my front door and started banging. I opened it with the chain lock still on. How do you know about the spare key? What? The one under the rock? Yeah, I saw you put it there last year. What's the big deal? You told Kayla about it. She needed to get in. Look, she can just stay there during the day while you're at work. You don't even have to see her. Problem solved. I stared at her for a long moment. She genuinely believed that. That Kayla sneaking into my house while I was at work, living there without my knowledge or consent, was a workable solution. That would make everyone happy. I told her that was not a solution. I told her she was still banned from the property and needed to leave. She said I couldn't ban my own sister. I closed the door. She banged on it for another 5 minutes before giving up and leaving. The locksmith changed everything. Front door, back door, garage door, and the opener code. $350 total with the emergency rate. I stood there writing the check, feeling nothing but relief. That night, Kayla sent a long email, rambling and emotional. She said I'd become cold and heartless, that the man she dated would never treat someone this way, that she was struggling, and I was making it worse on purpose. She closed by saying Lily was the only decent person in my family. I marked it as spam and went to bed. I thought the new locks and the silence would end things. It didn't. It escalated. Monday morning, my boss pulled me aside at work. He had an odd expression, not angry, just confused. Got a strange call Friday. Someone claiming to be your landlord. Said there was some kind of dispute about your property and asked about your employment status and salary. I own my house. I don't have a landlord. He nodded. That's what I figured. I told them I couldn't discuss employee information. He paused. Any idea who that was? I had a pretty clear idea. After work, I called my mortgage company. Had anyone contacted them recently? The rep checked. Yes. The day before, someone claiming to be my spouse had called asking about making a payment on the account. The company had refused to give out any details without account authorization, but they'd taken the call. I'm not married. I don't have a spouse. I flagged my account for fraud attempts and had security notes added to require a verbal password for any future inquiries. Then I called my homeowner's insurance company. Same story. Someone had called claiming to be a household member, asking about the policy coverage. Kayla was trying to build a paper trail. She was calling my financial institutions and my employer, claiming connections to my home and my finances, probably hoping to establish some kind of occupancy record she could use to argue she had a right to be there. It was methodical. It was also genuinely unhinged. I called the police non-emergency line and explained the full situation. The unauthorized entry, both key incidents, the impersonation calls. They said unless she physically showed up and attempted to enter, there wasn't much they could do in the immediate term. But they took a detailed report for documentation. 2 days later, I came home to find a notice on my door from the city's code enforcement office. An anonymous complaint had been filed claiming I was operating an illegal short-term rental without a permit. I am not running any kind of rental. I live there. Alone. I scheduled the inspection, then spent an evening pulling together every document I had, my mortgage statements, the property deed, utility bills in my name, my homeowner's insurance policy, 3 years of tax returns showing it as my primary residence. I organized everything chronologically and labeled it clearly. Not because I was worried about the inspection, there was obviously nothing to find, but because I'd realized by that point that documentation was the only thing that was going to matter when this eventually went somewhere bigger. When the inspector came that weekend, it took him less than 20 minutes to walk through and see that this was clearly just one person's home. No rental listings, no second residence, no sign of anything but a regular guy living alone. He marked the complaint as unfounded before he left. I asked if he could tell me anything about who filed it. He said anonymous complaints were common in neighbor disputes. This isn't a neighbor dispute, I told him. This is my ex-girlfriend and my sister running a harassment campaign because I wouldn't let one of them move in. He gave me a look that said he believed every word of it. He suggested I talk to a lawyer if anything else came up. That night, I sat down and organized everything into a single folder. Every text, every call record from my financial institutions, the police report, the code enforcement notice and its unfounded ruling, Kayla's email and screenshots of Lily's social media post from earlier that morning, showing her and Kayla looking perfectly fine at a coffee shop. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew the folder was going to matter. Okay, stop. Because I need to make sure you clocked what just happened. She called his employer. She called his mortgage company. She called his insurance provider. She filed a fake code enforcement complaint. This stopped being about housing weeks ago. This is a coordinated harassment campaign. And notice what he did. He didn't fire back. He didn't post about it, didn't send angry replies, didn't escalate publicly. He documented every single thing quietly, got the police report, and kept stacking his file. That's the difference between guys who actually win and guys who just make a lot of noise. He's building a case while they think they're still fighting for a couch. Watch what happens when he finally moves. Saturday morning. I was home drinking coffee when my doorbell camera picked up movement on the front walk. I opened the app and watched through the live feed. My mom, my dad, Lily, and Kayla. All four of them walking up to my front door together. I set my coffee down and didn't move from the couch. Mom knocked first, then called out. I used the doorbell camera's speaker. I know you're home. We need to talk. That was Mom. No. Open this door right now. No, you're trespassing. Please leave. This is family business. The family member whose band is there. The ex-girlfriend I've told no 4 times is there. This is not a conversation I'm having. Please leave. Kayla stepped up to the camera lens. She said she was sorry about everything, that she knew she'd gone about it wrong, that she was willing to pay rent this time, that she was desperate, that she was living out of her car. That last part was a lie. Lily had posted to her social media that same morning, tagged at a coffee shop downtown, sitting across from Kayla, both of them looking completely fine, coffees in hand. Not my problem, I said through the speaker. Dad stepped up next, using his reasonable voice. Just open the door. Let's talk like adults. Work something out. I am being an adult. Adults respect when they're told no. Adults don't show up at someone's home after being refused repeatedly. If anyone here wants to have an adult conversation, it doesn't start with 4 people showing up unannounced. Your mother wants to see you. She can see me when she's not trying to pressure me into housing someone I've said no to 4 times. I love Mom. This isn't how that works. Mom started crying. Loud, theatrical. About how her own son wouldn't even open his door to her. About what she'd done to deserve this. Using tears to change my answer isn't going to work. I want you all to leave. Lily's voice from the back. You've turned into such a jerk. The old you would never act like this. The old me got walked on constantly and thought it was the decent thing to do. I've updated that view. I suggest everyone adjust. They stood out there for about 20 minutes. There was yelling, crying, pleading, a few low-key implications about what this means for the family that were never fully spelled out. I watched it all on my phone from the couch and didn't move toward the door once. Dad finally convinced them to walk back to the cars. But as they were leaving, I heard Lily say to Kayla, just within range of the camera's audio, "Don't worry, I have a plan." That wasn't reassuring. Wait, don't worry, I have a plan. That line after everything they'd already done. Let me list what they'd already tried at this point. Showing up uninvited with suitcases, handing out his key twice, calling his employer, calling his mortgage company, calling his insurance company, filing a fake city complaint, staging a 4-person family ambush at his front door. And Lily still had a plan. This is the part where most people would start second-guessing themselves, where the guilt and the family pressure would start to erode the boundary. He didn't move an inch, and that's about to matter more than anything else he did. Sunday morning, I woke up to my phone going off on repeat. Texts from aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all saying some version of the same thing. Can't believe you did this to Kayla. Your sister is devastated. Family is supposed to help family. I thought you were a better person than this. Lily had posted a long emotional post about how I'd become cruel and unrecognizable, how I'd kicked a homeless woman out onto the street, how I'd banned my own sister for simply trying to do something kind, how our parents were heartbroken, how the brother she grew up with was apparently gone. The post had over 200 shares. The comments were full. People who had never met me, and people who had, calling me every name available. I could have posted my side of the story right then. I had every text, every instance of my no being overridden or ignored. The police report, the records of the calls to my employer and financial institutions, the code enforcement notice, and the unfounded ruling. All of it, documented and organized. Instead, I made a lawyer appointment for Monday morning and went back to sleep. I brought everything to that consultation. The initial text exchange with Kayla, my replies saying no, the texts with Lily after the key situation, the police report, the call records from my mortgage company and insurance, the code enforcement documentation, screenshots of Lily's social media post. The lawyer went through all of it slowly. Then he looked up. This is harassment, in multiple forms. The false reports to your employer and financial institutions are potentially criminal. The social media post, depending on what's in it specifically, is defamatory, and you have documentation for all of it. He asked what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted it to stop. He drafted a cease and desist letter that afternoon. Formal legal letterhead. It outlined every incident in chronological order. The unauthorized entry, the key situation, the impersonation calls to my employer and financial institutions, the false code enforcement complaint, and the social media defamation. It stated that any further contact, including routing communication through third parties like mutual friends or relatives, would result in legal action up to and including restraining orders and civil liability suits. One letter went to Kayla, one to Lily. I paused when the lawyer asked about my parents. Send them one too. All four went out certified mail on Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone had gone completely quiet for the first time in weeks. No texts, no calls, no emails from unknown numbers, no social media notifications. Nothing. Thursday, Dad called from a number I hadn't blocked yet. We got the letter. Good. Long pause. Was that really necessary? Yes, nothing else worked. They wouldn't stop. He sighed. Said Mom was very upset. Said Lily was talking about moving out of state. Asked if I genuinely didn't care at all. I told him I cared about my right to make decisions about my home being respected. Since that hadn't been happening through normal conversation, I'd escalated. They were free to feel however they felt about it. But they were the ones who kept going after every clear answer I gave them. He was quiet for a moment. Then, for what it's worth, I think your sister needed this. She's been entitled for too long. Your mother coddled her. This might actually force some growth. Maybe, or she'd just find new people to take advantage of. Either way, it genuinely wasn't my problem anymore. Let me come in one more time before the final update, because I want you to sit with this specific number. He spent $400 on a lawyer. That's it. $400. And it ended a multi-week campaign that included impersonation calls to his bank, his employer, and his insurance company, a fake city code complaint, a 4-person ambush at his front door, and a public smear post with 200 shares. $400 and certified mail. The lesson here isn't that lawyers are expensive. The lesson is that people keep doing what costs them nothing. The moment the cost went up, real legal consequences, documented on record, everything stopped. He understood that earlier than most people figure it out, and it saved him months. Final update! It's been 6 weeks since the cease and desist letters went out. Here's where everything landed. Kayla found an apartment through mutual friend connections. She's living with 2 roommates now, and from what I've heard through the grapevine, she's not having a great time because they're messy and don't respect her space. I'm not going to pretend I don't find that funny. She moved out of a situation where her ex said no, and into a situation where strangers say no with their dirty dishes. That's the universe doing its thing. She made one more attempt to reach me, sent a mutual friend to ask if I'd be willing to grab coffee and clear the air. I told the friend no. I also told the friend that if Kayla kept routing people through mutual contacts, that counted as a violation of the cease and desist, and to pass that along. Haven't heard anything since. Lily didn't actually move out of state like she threatened. She moved to the next city over, and is apparently living with a boyfriend I'd never heard of before all of this. Based on stress updates my dad passes along, it's not going smoothly. The boyfriend has expectations and schedules and opinions about shared spaces. Lily apparently finds this controlling. I find it Tuesday. She sent me a friend request on social media last week. I haven't accepted it, haven't declined it either. Just left it sitting there in the pending folder. That felt like the right amount of energy to give it. Mom and I still aren't talking. She's upset. Dad says she'll eventually come around. I'm genuinely okay either way. When everything was happening, she made it clear that keeping the peace mattered more to her than my right to make decisions about my own home. That's useful information about where I stand with her. I'd rather know it than not. Dad and I talk every couple of weeks. He's been decent about the whole thing, honest without being dramatic. He keeps me updated on the family situation when something worth noting happens. Apparently, Lily has been telling people that I threatened to sue her, which isn't accurate. The letter said that continued harassment would result in legal action. Threatening to sue someone and stating the consequences of continued harassment are not the same thing, but nuance isn't Lily's strong suit. About half the relatives who reached out originally have come back around after I shared the full screenshot record with them. The other half still think I should have just been the bigger person and helped out. Those people don't get a lot of my time or attention. The house feels different now. Better. I rearranged some furniture, repainted the guest room, and turned it into a proper home office. No more spare rooms sitting there like an open invitation. I put in a proper security system. Cameras on every entrance, motion sensors, real-time alerts to my phone. Probably more than strictly necessary, but after everything that happened, I'm not leaving anything to chance. It's my space. It stays protected. Someone asked me last week if I regretted going as hard as I did. If maybe I should have just let Kayla stay for a week or two to keep the peace and avoid all of this. Here's my honest answer. Letting her stay wouldn't have avoided the drama. It would have guaranteed worse drama later, on a longer timeline with fewer options. If she'd moved in for just a couple of weeks, that would have stretched into months. At some point, whether it was 2 months in or 6, getting her out would have required a formal eviction process because she'd have established legal occupancy in my home. She would have had rights I'd have had to fight through court to undo. And Lily would have learned that she could override my decisions anytime she pushed hard enough. That my no was a starting position in a negotiation, not an actual answer. The conflict was always going to happen. The only real question was whether I'd deal with it on my terms or theirs. I chose mine. Do I wish things weren't the way they are with my family right now? Sure. But I don't wish I'd done anything differently. They showed me who they were the moment my comfort mattered less than their convenience. That's not something you unsee. And Kayla showed me she hadn't changed at all in 3 years. Still the same pattern of assuming she'd get what she wanted if she just pushed past the first no. Knowing that about her now, before she had any foothold in my home, is genuinely valuable. If you're dealing with something similar, your no is complete. You don't have to explain it, justify it, or make people comfortable with it. No is a full answer on its own. When people decide to ignore it, that's when you stop explaining and start escalating. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. The behavior stops when the cost of continuing it goes up. My costs were new locks, a lawyer, and a smaller Christmas card list. The house is quiet. My space is mine again. I'm good. And that's the whole thing. He said no. They decided it wasn't a real no. He said it again, clearer. They showed up with suitcases. And then they spent weeks throwing everything they had at him. Family pressure, fake complaints, impersonation calls, a social media smear, and he just kept his footing the entire time. No explosion, no drama from his end. Just documentation, locks, and a $400 legal letter that ended the whole thing in 48 hours. Drop your take in the comments. Was there a point where you would have caved? Or did he nail every call? Like if you think he handled it right, and subscribe for more stories like this one.